I work with the county. I'm an environmental project manager in the Department of Environmental Stewardship. And excited to have you guys here tonight to discuss sea level rise, which is certainly not a new topic for this community or our county by any means, something that's been discussed and I think brought up in various conversations over years and decades. But I think we are now reaching a point where those conversations need to be transitioning into some action, which is not an easy or quick transition to make. So the point of these workshops is to start moving in that direction, a little less of just all the work we've been doing in the past and conversations and studies and actually doing something with that now. And so we want to spark that with this first workshop to kind of build a foundation to drive our second workshop and also frame what we want to talk about in our second workshop that hopefully gets a little bit more into the nitty gritty. With me this evening is our Director of Environmental Stewardship, Kendra Smith. And then we've also got a couple of consultants from Herrera Consulting. We have Rachel Johnson and Andrea McLennan. And they are going to be providing the presentation and driving the discussion today and at the next workshop as well. I'll let you two introduce yourselves and take it from here.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
All right, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Andrea McLennan. I'm a coastal geomorphologist. I've been in the region for over 25 years now. And what I tend to do is look at how our shorelines are changing, how they're eroding or accreting, and how that relates to habitats and coastal management and climate adaptation. That's the short version.
Yeah. And hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Rachel. I'm a water resources engineer. So I do work with flooding, with stormwater, with rising seas, helping communities understand those changes and start to plan to adapt to those. So excited to be here with you all tonight. And we've got a handful of folks joining online as well. How many do we have right now?
4 so far.
4 so far. Okay. Well, with the smaller group tonight, really want to have this be more discussion based. So this is informal. If you have a question, please just ask it. We really want it to be more of a dialogue. Great. So here's, the things we're hoping to chat about tonight. Provide a bit of background to start talking about the challenges that we're seeing. Give a little bit of background on sea level rise and coastal hazards. So we're all starting with the same language and background. We're going to aim to have a break around 6:30, get up, stretch, have a snack. And we'll talk then about adaptation strategies. So how can we adapt to the changes we're seeing? Now we really want to have time for discussion to hear your thoughts and your concerns and start talking about those. And then we'll kind of wrap up and transition into next steps for our second workshop. I guess to start, who here lives on the coast? Any of you?
No. The coast.
Do you live on the shoreline?
Like on the
Do you live on the water?
Gotcha.
No? Okay.
That's an interesting difference.
Yes, that is.
Some of the other groups, they were like, there was a lot at Shaw.
Almost everybody.
Almost everyone, yeah. Yeah, and who has been to a workshop before on Orcas about sea level rise or coastal hazards? Any of you? Is this familiar?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm also curious, how did you all hear about this? I heard you were saying a newsletter maybe, or the Chamber of Commerce. How about some of you?
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce, okay. Cindy Wolf, okay.
Social media.
Okay. Yeah, great, okay. Don't really need all this, but if you didn't sign in, there's a sign-in sheet. We just want to know who's here. We also, we have folks who are joining online. So Tyler's going to be keeping an eye out for questions from them. And we have a kind of interactive tool that will allow them to ask questions and participate. Lots of opportunities for questions. And then, we're aiming to wrap up around 7:30. So just some logistics.
Can we turn the lights? Is that the minimum lighting?
Oh,
That's good.
That's a good question. It's in the closet, kind of out and around. Through the door to the left. It might be a bit confusing. You folks in the front row, how is the view? Are you able to see that okay?
You mean to the right, the rear?
Yeah, to your right, yeah. Well, we can see. Since it's a theater, there's a lot of fancy lighting. Oh, now it's dark.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Looks like we got off the room.
Oh, we got all of them up.
Better be presenting slides.
Okay, yeah, we could turn it off for the slides and then turn it on for the second half when we're discussing one. We could do that. Yeah, okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so don't, if any of you are feeling sleepy, like we wanna chat, don't want us to, don't want people to fall asleep here. So our goal today is to share information, continue a conversation about the changes that we're seeing, sea level rise, erosion, risks to infrastructure. So to learn about that, to just continue discussing and then prepare for workshop 2, which will be later this month. And this goes without saying, but you know, everyone's taking time on other days, maybe after work, to be here. So just want to have a space that's supportive for listening to each other and learning. Okay. You're going to see this pop up at times. No need to pull out your phone. This is mostly for the online folks, but I have questions here that they'll be able to answer and that I'm curious to hear your answers. So what brings you here today? I heard how you found out about the workshop, but I'm curious, what if you're comfortable sharing, why were you interested in attending this tonight?
Yeah, I'm with the group that I created called the Friends of Rural Public Transportation. And we wrote an opinion piece for the Orcas County. And we're suggesting that that we should create a public transit system here on Orcas. And there's an idea that public transit is one solution that we can use to help mitigate the cause of sea level rise. So I'm here to ask folks, to talk about public transit as being the solution to help mitigate the cause of sea level rise.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about roads and transportation as well, since that's something that's really impacted by rising waters and erosion. Yeah.
And one of the counties, the only county, at least western Washington, is not the entire state that doesn't have a public transit system. It was funded primarily from the sales tax.
Yeah. Yeah, other folks, what brought you here tonight? Is there something you're hoping to learn? Yeah.
Been a beach naturalist for many years.
Okay.
And, so that's always interested and worked with stormwater for a number of years. So.
Okay.
And anything science is better.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, anyone else? Reason that brings you here tonight or something you're really hoping to learn? Yeah.
I wanted to become aware of what the county's doing with emission reduction targets instead of just mitigation. Everything. Mostly driven by tourism. Are we just, rearranging the deck chairs, or are we actually going to try to reduce the emissions by putting meaningful constraints on tourism?
Okay. We might not touch on that a ton, but we can talk about that more in the discussion. Yeah, any other things that bring you here today that you're hoping to learn about? Yeah.
I'm just curious about, with your expertise, with your, on how the shoreline is going to change and then how quickly the sea level is going to rise and adaptations and what changes will be happening with this that we need to plan.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll touch on many of those things. Okay, so just keeping an eye on time. Okay, so this is maybe not unfamiliar images to you all. We've seen lots of signs of change in the past years and decades with flooding and erosion. So flooding during high tides and storms. There's many roads throughout the county like Crescent Bay and Port Stanley that have seen water over the surface. Erosion of bluffs and beaches with waves and rainfall, and in some places where beaches are narrowing or disappearing. And then also impacts from stormwater, seeing more intense rains that are overwhelming our drainage systems, which can also contribute to erosion and flooding. So these are seeing impacts to infrastructure, whether that's roads that are being undermined with erosion or sagging or cracking. Also homes and buildings that are seeing more floodwater, septic systems that are getting inundated from higher groundwater, and then also places where there's been intrusion with salt water into wells, contaminating drinking water. So many challenges. Are there any spots on Orcas where you all have seen some changes?
Oh, there's one on the screen right there.
Where's the right hand button?
I do
I'm
not.
not sure for that one.
Okay, good, because I couldn't post it either.
Yeah.
It looks almost like, the one shop, but.
Mhm. Yeah. Any hotspots in where you live or where places that you drive or visit regularly? Crescent Beach? Yep.
Deer Harbor Road,
Mm-hmm. Philibru, yep. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about some of those. Also, a lot of ecological impacts too, as we see more flooding and erosion. So really important habitats that can also do a lot of things like provide protection from waves and improve water quality and store carbon and have a lot of cultural and recreational values. But sea level rise and erosion can also impact those and the species that are able to live there. The county's done a lot of studies and has had a lot of efforts over the past years and decades. One was a assessment that was wrapped up in earlier this year that mapped roads and buildings and infrastructure. So if anyone's curious, I can share the link for that later. And then other community engagement and efforts. So we're really just building on that work. And so the conversation today, also starting that because planning ahead just gives more options. So allows us to act before damage happens, compare alternatives. So see, does one option make more sense? What are the costs? What are the benefits and the trade-offs for that? To be able to protect the things that matter the most, and also to hopefully reduce costs over time by choosing solutions that are most cost effective. And everyone has a role to play in adapting. The county can't do it all. So some things will be more personal, like what can happen on individual property, like elevating or moving homes or rethinking septic systems. And then other things will be more collective. And we really want to hear from you because your input will help shape the second workshop. And also, just kind of future planning efforts. Any questions or anything else so far?
What does Herrera stand for?
Oh, great question. That's the company we work for and it's named after our founder. His name was Carlos Herrera. Yeah.
Still is, he's still around.
Sorry, he is still around.
He doesn't work for the company though anymore.
Yeah, he started it 40 something years ago as a graduate student, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, just gonna go into a little bit more of the background. So when we say sea level rise, what are we talking about? That is the long-term increase in the average height of the ocean. And why we're seeing sea level rise is kind of simply because global temperatures are rising. I really like this image because it shows the average temperature from every year from 1850 to 2023. So each line represents the average temperature for that year. And it shows really clearly that our past several decades have been the warmest on record. And going into the future, we have many different possible scenarios of what the future could look like. And that really just depends on our emissions. So if it's more of a lower emissions future, we're still going to see temperature rises, but they will be smaller. And if we have more emissions, then we're going to see even greater increases in temperature. And that's important for sea level rise because the ocean is a powerhouse. It has absorbed a lot of the increase in temperature that we've seen over the past decades and centuries. And this map here shows how much the ocean surface temperature has warmed in different areas. So warmer colors mean that it has absorbed more heat. And that's important because when water gets warm, it takes up more space. And so that is contributing to a lot of the rise in sea level. And also because as we have warmer air temperatures, that also increases the melting of ice on land. So in Antarctica and Greenland and glaciers around the world. And how sea level rise is changing is that we know that it is accelerating. The graph on the left here shows looking back in time. So that is the past 100 years of the tide gauge in Seattle. And so the variations you see are water levels throughout the year. It was measuring water levels. And we've seen about 8 inches of sea level rise over the past 100 years. And it's been really linear. So it's been kind of gradual over that time. But as we look to the future, so the one on the right is projections looking forward based on observations and based on our best climate models. And we see kind of a whole range of possible futures, really depending on emissions. So we could see anywhere from, 1 foot all the way up to 8 feet. The line on the bottom, the red line, that's the line that's like we have 99% certainty that our models do, that we'll see about 1 foot of rise or more. The orange line is kind of that middle of the road scenario, so about a 50% likelihood that we'll see about 3 feet or more. And then the other line is the 1%, so kind of that worst case scenario of a 1% chance of seeing about 8 feet or more. Any questions? This is kind of a tough thing to think through. Yeah.
There's no other agency that has been keeping track of this since 1900 there?
Yes.
Okay.
NOAA is the agency that has tide gauges around the US that's measuring water levels. NASA also has satellites that measure the height of the ocean surface, and together those form the basis for kind of our knowledge of the past and how things have been changing. Yeah.
Has no existed for,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I should know this because I worked for NOAA for a bit, and they were formed, I think, by Thomas Jefferson with the first survey of the coast.
Wow.
So NOAA has been around for a very long time. Yeah. Yeah.
They're closed today.
So yeah. Don't think about some of the other students. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't.
No, that's fair. The tide gauge probably still taking data though. So sea level rise, this is important because it sets the baseline for flooding and erosion. So we have tide, we have storm surge, we have waves all on top of that. And if that baseline rises, that pushes water up, it allows it to reach higher and further inland. So really, we're seeing our baseline changing. And so with that also increases the frequency of high tide floods that we see. So this is NOAA data here, looking both kind of historically and into the future. So we've seen previously about 1.8 days on average of minor high tide flooding each year. By 2050, that could be closer to 6 days. And when we look up to 2100, that could be closer to 120 days.
I'm sorry, are these stats specific for Seattle, Puget Sound, or is this US or is this global?
Oh, this is specific to Puget Sound. Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. Because we do see differences around the globe. There are some places that have much higher amounts of sea level rise and some that have lower. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. Any other questions so far? Yeah.
How do you respond to somebody like Cliff Mass, who, I don't know if you know who Cliff Mass is,
Mm-hmm.
but he seemingly, doesn't, his views don't seem to, in my opinion, agree with the narrative of climate change.
Mm.
The UW, weather scientists, meteorologists,
What
I
I
think
do
his-
know is there, oh yeah,
I was gonna say, I think his bigger beef is with how the media portrays it.
Right.
yeah.
I think it's more that. I don't think he's a climate denier. I
Yeah.
don't think he's necessarily, I don't think he thinks that sea level rise isn't happening. He really has a big issue with how the media portrays it and uses it as a way to get more readers,
Yeah.
pay their bills. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because the scientific community does really have consensus on the changes that have been observed and what we're seeing. I think a lot of the challenge is how do you communicate it? How do you share what changes we're seeing and the uncertainty that we have with that? Yeah. Okay. So also, with sea level rise, this is a bit of an aside, we sometimes hear the 100-year flood. This I think is really important to understand that when we say something is a 100-year flood or a 20-year event, what we're really saying is that it has a 1 out of 100 chance of happening in any given year. That's about a 1% chance of occurring in any year. And so even though that's like kind of a rare event, it's often used as a planning threshold for engineering. Like you have to think about what is that low probability, but really high risk scenario where you don't want to be putting people or things at risk with that. And because our baselines are changing for this, like what has historically been a 100-year event is not likely to be the same event in the future. And also, just because it happens doesn't mean that it's going to happen once every 100 years. You could have it happen 1 year and the year after that and the year after that. So this graphic on the right, I think is kind of helpful to see with that too, that that probability can accumulate over time. So this is from the Weather Service. The chance that a home was in a 100-year floodplain or was exposed to a 100-year storm event, the chance of that, if it was in a 100-year floodplain, of that flooding at least once over a 30-year mortgage would be 26%. And then over an average lifetime would be 55%. And if it happened twice over an average lifetime, that'd be about 14%. So probability kind of works in weird ways. So uncertainty, we have some uncertainty in how much sea level rise we're going to see over time. We are very certain that it's going to continue and it's going to continue for centuries. The uncertainty is really about when we're going to see specific amounts. And that uncertainty comes from how quickly are we as a global community going to reduce emissions, and also how good are our models, which are getting increasingly better over time. So San Juan County did a study recently and selected 2 different scenarios to plan for the future. So one is 2 feet of sea level rise and one is 5 feet of sea level rise. And these are helpful because they kind of represent different future scenarios and have different uses. So 2 feet is something that we're more likely to see between now and 2100. So it can be used to think about shorter term decisions. Whereas 5 feet is, kind of that farther in the future, less likely in the near term, but could be used to think about longer term infrastructure projects. So building a new wastewater treatment plant in that area would not make sense given the amount of capital that goes into that. And then looking specifically about kind of the likelihood of each of those. So for 2 feet, we see about a 10% likelihood of meeting or exceeding that in the 2080s. 50% in the 2100s, very likely looking into the future. And then for 5 feet, pretty low probability in the near term, but that increases over time. So by the time we look to 2100, that's about that 1% chance event. And then by the 2140s, long after we're all here, that'll be closer to the 10%. Any questions about the probability? Yeah.
That's a bit of a question. You said this was for Puget Sound, but
Oh, this is for San Juan County.
someone.
This is for San Juan County. Yep. Great question. Yep.
So this incorporates the local vertical land movement,
Yes.
which differs in Seattle and
Yep.
across the regions.
Yep. Yep.
Can you explain that term, local vertical land movement?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
So, okay. Do you want
Yep, go for it though. Yeah.
to? Okay. So we talked about how the height of the water is changing. The height of the land is also changing in some places. So there's some places where the land is sinking. So that could be there's groundwater withdrawal. It could be it's in a river delta. And so if you think about those places that's sinking and you have rising water, your impacts are going to be more. We have other places where land is slowly rising. So this whole area was covered in glaciers tens of thousands of years ago, and slowly over time, as those have left, the land is rising. We also have, active plate tectonics. And so in most places though, actually everywhere here, the amount that the land is rising is not keeping pace with the water level. So that's why it's a little bit different in every place throughout Puget Sound, throughout the Salish Sea, and across the US and world, is that those relationships are different. Yeah.
I was rather amazed to learn that a few years ago, and apparently those measurements now are taken by satellite.
Yeah.
And there's sensors all over the state of Washington. Do we have any in San Juan County that measures changes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there are multiple sites, I think, in the county, and I think my understanding, and then the two is with sort of Olympia and Seattle, where I was thinking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Our coast is still rising a little bit,
Yep.
and San Juan, we basically have had a rebound.
Okay.
But we have had some rebound, so that has slowed our pace of sea level rise. So I think even if you look like the Friday Harbor tide gauge, also has maybe close to 100 year record, and it's slightly less than Seattle, and that is mostly because of the vertical land.
Okay, so essentially
We're not going up or down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we abated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
rising.
we were going up.
Yep.
But
until
it's,
very recently.
but it's still, the sea level rise projections are still outpacing
Yeah.
that vertical land movement, even in Neah Bay. And what we're talking about is a relative sea level rise projection that includes the vertical land movement. And whereas like the global sea level rise projections that are like reported by the IPCC or the International Panel on Climate Change, they report like eustatic sea level rise, which is just across the globe. So,
Yeah. The University of Washington Climate Impacts Group has helped kind of get all of these projections specific to Washington.
And when I go
Yeah.
back, and ask a question on one of the previous slides, you said that seawater or the oceans are absorbing a lot of the heat and that water expands as water warms, which would add to. So how important is or how much does heat in the ocean contribute to this?
To
The rise? Is it just microscopically different, or is it something significant? Because I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
And I'm submariners.
I know, it's an interesting fact. The short answer is it really depends on the location, and NOAA used to have a tool, it might be hosted by NASA now, I can see if I can find it, and it shows for different regions the amount of contribution depending on where you are. So in some places, the warming ocean is actually the largest contribution. In other places, it's more from melting of land-based ice. But generally, the warming of the water is a huge contributor.
It's a big contributor.
Big contributor, yeah.
I had learned in grad school that like most of the sea level rise projections, at least back then, so this is like 2003. That 95% of the projections were coming from thermal expansion because they were not including much in land-based ice then, and that those like what we call like cryospheric inputs like coming from the ice have really been advancing and remains like one of the greater sources of uncertainty and in the projections today.
Yeah. Yeah, the science behind all of that is very interesting. Also depends on your proximity to where the land ice is melting. So we can chat about that more at the break if you've got a question about that. Also, in addition to sea level rise, it's also important to say that there's other types of flooding too. We can have compound flooding, which is when you have multiple sources of floodwaters coming together. So that can come from rainfall, from precipitation, which we know is increasing in intensity of some of the storms that we have. Also groundwater flooding, or in areas where there's rivers, riverine flooding too. So these events can overlap, happen at the same time, and then make damage from one event, make it worse than it would be if it was just one thing on its own. With that, I want to pause. Any other questions before we start talking about coastal erosion?
One of our audience members chimed in just to offer that if you have more interest in learning about the 100-year flood and like the math and how that all, uncertainty and how that works, they offered a YouTube video from a channel called Practical Engineering that explains it very well if you're interested in learning more about that, because it's kind of a hard thing to wrap one's head around.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Okay, well, with that, I will pass it to Andrea to chat about erosion.
Okay. It's kind of unusual to present in the dark. I don't know how my glasses are gonna help me at all. I just have new glasses that I'm constantly adjusting to. Anyways, so coastal erosion is obviously one of the main hazards associated with sea level rise and climate change. And the reason for that is that our shorelines are constantly in a state of dynamic equilibrium with the water level at various scales. And I'm kind of going to talk about that in these slides. But erosion looks different along different shoreline types. As you can hear in these images, it may be a landslide, a small shallow landslide on a coastal bluff. It could be a deep seated slide on a larger bluff, or it could just be a little bit of bank erosion in the form of like.
Turning into.
Sounds familiar, yeah. Or on a low elevation shore, it could be like the recession or like landward movement of the shoreline. All of those things are kind of in this broader bucket of coastal erosion associated with sea level rise. And with that comes impacts to infrastructure, such as our coastal roads, homes where they're in close proximity to the shoreline, as well as some narrowing of beaches that we may be recreating on, as well as the habitats that are found there. So why is this coastal erosion happening? Well, generally coastal erosion is a natural process, even though, people often are alarmed by it. It is just part of the way that nature works and is actually kind of continuing to occur on this scale of geologic time. Coastal erosion is driven by many different things, and I'm going to talk about that. But one of the main drivers along all shorelines is the influence of waves. Within the Salish Sea, the highly kind of crenulated, complex shoreline that we have kind of precludes the development of big waves. It's described as a fetch limited environment because our waves can only get so large. We're not exposed to ocean swell here, or very few places are exposed to much ocean swell at all within the Salish Sea. And so wind waves are formed, as you would guess, by winds as they develop. They commonly lead to the kind of like an oblique approach to the shore. And a little rough start to this one. So as they approach the shore, commonly at an oblique angle, here you can see the waves will wash up the beach in one direction and down the beach at a 90-degree angle. And that action actually produces an alongshore current. It kind of kicks up sediment into suspension that's like then transported down shore or down drift. So what that produces is kind of a sediment transport direction that is largely driven by the dominant direction of the wind waves along a given shoreline. So all of the shorelines of Washington have been delineated into distinct sediment cells that all have a dominant direction of sediment transport. And it's a really helpful management unit for kind of understanding how our shorelines are working and kind of the interconnected nature of the shorelines. Because as one shoreline erodes, so here we are in this is an example of an individual drift cell. So as this bluff erodes here at the origin of this drift cell, that sediment is transported downdrift and leads to the development or kind of the sustenance of these beaches and the development of this whole coastal landform down here. So this area and all of that intertidal habitats, or much of the intertidal habitats that are found down along the downriver shore, are actually dependent upon the erosion of those coastal bluffs. Any questions before I move on? Okay. So the whole cell is called a net shore drift cell. So there are many different drivers of erosion that are occurring on our shorelines. This graphic kind of encompasses several different forms, several different drivers, largely the ones that you just see on land. But in addition to those that you see on land, there is the waves, the wave-induced erosion that we were just discussing in the previous slide. Now, this bucket that you see here in this graphic is referred to as subaerial erosion. These are all drivers of erosion that are associated with the geology of the bluff, its topography, the groundwater, as well as the third bucket. There's some depictions of the third bucket, which is human-induced erosion. So ways of which we're using the landscape that contribute to additional erosion. So by removing vegetation, here with these trees that have been removed, by heavily irrigating a bluff, or adding to the groundwater. Generally, that can result in more seepage on the bluff face, which can contribute to erosion. Adding a lot of stormwater and surface water onto the shoreline can also lead to saturated conditions that will drive erosion. Leaky water lines, that's a common driver of erosion. All of these can contribute to landslides and instability on our bluffs and on our shorelines. And one of the reasons that adding water generally to a coastal bluff environment like this really accelerates the erosion or contributes to that erosion is because of the stratigraphy of our bluffs. And most often the bluffs are comprised of permeable material overlying impermeable material, such as sand overlying clay, and the water percolates through the sand, collects above the slate, and which leads to the formation of a slide plane and a slide forms. Now, there is a pretty well documented precipitation threshold in the region for when landslides occur on our shorelines after about, or actually on all slopes, it's not just marine shorelines, but after about 2 to 3 days of heavy rains within the region, we start to see landslides occur. And that's because of this sensitivity associated with the bluff stratigraphy. And it's visible across the region. You know, after we have those heavy rains, DNR will actually post that there is a landslide vulnerability or hazard warning, and you'll commonly hear that like Amtrak is closed down between Seattle and Hebron because that topography or that stratigraphy is all over that reach of shoreline where the Amtrak runs, and in addition to there being like 200 to 300 foot bluffs. So then they have like this very steep topography and lots of gravity kind of working alongside that sensitive geology. Okay, so different shoreline types respond to a rising sea level differently. So here I'm going to walk through like each of the major shoreline types and just describe how they naturally respond. The simplest is a bedrock shoreline where you really just see like a vertical rise in the intertidal area, which may also include like a shift in the vegetation and biotic communities in the intertidal, as well as like some of the vegetation in the upland that is sensitive to salt spray or, little bits of salt water. Coastal bluff, in contrast, the whole beach profile will shift landward. So because on on a coastal bluff, the toe of the slope is in a dynamic equilibrium with the crest. If one recedes, the other recedes, kind of in tandem. It doesn't all happen at the same time. There's a standard cycle to it where the toe is undercut by waves, and then the crest will adjust in response to that. But generally, the recession of the whole profile is what we can expect to occur with a rise in sea level. And that sediment that's eroded from the face of the bluff. Okay, the sediment that's eroded here from the face of the bluff actually enables the intertidal and the low tide terrace, which is the sand flats, to build up in response to the rise in sea level. So you don't actually lose intertidal space. The whole thing just shifts landward. Now, in addition to that sediment providing that function on that actual beach on site, additional sediment is transported downshore or downdrift to kind of facilitate the adaptation of downdrift shores. So the downdrift shores depend on this erosion as well. So one thing that researchers have taught us in recent years is that the background rate of sea level rise, I guess, excuse me, I'm saying the wrong words here, pardon me, let me try again. That as sea levels rise on coastal bluffs, we can expect the bluff erosion to accelerate at the same rate that the sea level rise is accelerating. And so if you, when you're anticipating erosion associated with sea level rise along the bluff shore, you have to plan for that acceleration to occur over time in associated with the sea level rise projections that Rachel was showing on the graph. We know that between now and 2050, there is a much slower rate of sea level rise, but that pace is going to accelerate considerably between 2050 and 2100. So we should also be planning for our bluffs to recede more rapidly beyond 2050. So if something has a very narrow setback distance now, we can anticipate that it's going to be much worse in the future. It's going to be much smaller in the future. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I love this taking, you broke it to him last night.
I mean, there was a lot of concern, yes, about the cost of moving houses, unfortunately.
You know how high. Yeah, I mean.
What was the response to that?
What was our response to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we gave them a link to the data that shows, what the different, elevations are. We have, we'll show you on the screen.
How high for flooding and how far back.
Yeah, there's, different scenarios.
Yeah, and it's different in different locations based on the shore type and wave exposure. So those are all taken into account in some of the maps that were created with the county study, which we can provide that link to you in some later slides. So for our low elevation shorelines, similarly, they also will be shifting landward, but also building upward. And they, again, are relying on that sediment from updrift erosion to be able to translate landward. This is called shoreline translation, where it shifts up and landward. This occurs typically during high water events and what we refer to as overwash processes, where actually during that high water event, the coarser material on the beach gets pushed up the beach. And as does the driftwood and other debris that's on the beach. And it builds up, it builds further landward and up higher. And that is it naturally trying to respond to that high water event. And so we always discourage people from putting the driftwood back where it was before, because you're kind of like negating that natural adaptation by doing that. And along armored shorelines, the adaptation process is kind of lost because of the static position of the shoreline armor. The sea will continue to rise and the intertidal will actually narrow as a result. And it does that actually from the upper beach down greatly. So you lose those upper elevations of the beach, like commonly see along armored shores, a real lack of driftwood because the armor has been placed right in the area where the driftwood would normally lay on the beach profile. And so as sea levels rise, you actually incrementally lose the intertidal along the beach profile, kind of further waterward over time. So you lose that, that driftwood and backshore line, and then the upper intertidal, which is where forage fish spawn, like surf smelt and sandlands, which are provide a lot of value for much of the marine food web. So this is referred to as the coastal squeeze, where we lose the intertidal along static shorelines. Shoreline armor is also highly impactful in association with the sediment input. Many people, when they live on a coastal bluff and are alarmed are alarmed by the change that they see by a landslide or other change on the slope, they may armor the toe of the slope. Unfortunately, about 90% of the material that is on our beaches is directly derived from coastal bluff erosion. So armoring the shores directly kind of like prevents or impounds that sediment supply. And that is kind of a critical issue at this point in the region where about, over 33% of our bluffs or our sediment supply has been lost to shoreline armor. It's one of these stories of death by 1,000 cuts. In this case, parcel by parcel, armor kind of cumulatively amounts to a great loss to that resilience and adaptive capacity of our beaches.
You can skip that one.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just kind of a snapshot of the story, the initial page of the story map, and the report that was completed last year for San Juan County that has some great mapping products and visualizations of what sea level rise will look like in San Juan County. We've included some snapshots of some local areas.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember where we switched now.
You can go.
Okay. We're almost to break. Okay, sorry.
These examples, yeah.
Yeah, so we've like refined things. This is our 4th workshop and we keep moving this spot. So pardon me. Anyways, I encourage you to just, even if you just Google sea level rise in San Juan County, you'll come to this page and there's a lot to explore. Okay, I'm gonna give you a little bit of guidance on how to read this map. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. Generally, there's a gradient depicted here in this legend. It's probably really hard to read. I can barely read it.
Yeah.
Of course, I need my glasses now. Okay, so in the light blue, you have a 1-year flood event and 2 feet of sea level rise. So that's your typical winter, but with 2 feet of sea level rise. So your typical winter in 2050. The more royal blue is a 100-year flood event with 2 feet of sea level rise. So that is a big storm in 2050. So that is a major expansion of those flooded areas. And then in that lighter lavender, that is a 1-year flood event with 5 feet of sea level rise. So that's 10% probability for 2100. And or the deeper kind of violet is a 100-year flood event with 5 feet of sea level rise. So that's an enormous amount of inundation. Yeah, major impacts of the airport there. know where you're landing a seaplane, hopefully, at this point. But, it's important, definitely very important for planning and for major investments, infrastructure, as well as, just being aware of what's to come. I mean, obviously that what you're seeing in the deeper purple is a much lower probability. Of occurring even by 2050 or 2100, pardon me.
Could you point out where the septic plant is, where the treatment plants are on that map?
I can't.
It's right at the edge of the purple. Bottom of the map, where the two red triangles are.
Yeah.
Passing thing. Just past them.
Yeah, we
There we go, here.
Yeah, that's pretty early on.
Yeah, keep going.
Improvements.
That's actually where the word storage facilities are.
Yeah, the cursor keeps disappearing. I thought I had it placed in the right place. There it is. There.
Yeah, that second red triangle is the driveway that goes into the,
This one?
no, down.
No, this is the second one.
That, I think is the driveway just off the bottom lane that goes into septic facility. Or sewage facility.
So-
Resort is up there, the square house is right up at the top there.
Yeah,
So that blue that they're in, that means there, how much water? Yeah,
that's 100 years flood, with 2 feet of sea level rise.
so that'd be the Smuggler Villas cabins, if you said you're 2 feet of water, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. And these were the total water level images, right? So this also includes wave runoff. And setup, but definitely wave impact.
So they may not be sitting in 2 feet of water, but it means that they would be inundated with 2 feet of sea level rise plus the 100-year flood happening. They would be flooded, not necessarily with 2 feet of standing water.
So it kind of depends like what the finished floor of the building is too. If it's raised up a little bit, it might not be that the building is wet in that, like the structure itself might not have water in it, but it's the footing would be, yeah, the lot. And to be able to get into the building, you'd be wading through water.
Yeah, next door, I compared to
Can let them know.
Yeah.
You want to come to the workshop?
When I will say, it's no surprise, right, like we do this work on the side of this, and we've even done some of these with us, I think we've been to 90% of those houses that are on the shore along in front of the airport, right, because they're experiencing already, coastal flooding with a lot of fetch and then also the wetland behind the. So there's some, all these places, right, people are already, this is not like some theoretical future thing, people are already experiencing flooding.
Right, and in many cases, the areas that are flooding are also historical wetlands that are, where the groundwater, they're kind of like already vulnerable to flooding because of their soils and the topography drains down to those areas. And in some cases, they're on, fill that's maybe subsided over time. So, here we are. Crescent Beach, where there is a large historical wetland. And, the barrier has, that barrier beach has not been able to adapt to the 8 inches of sea level rise that have already occurred, and it hasn't been able to shift landward over time too, so that's that would have, like, its natural adaptive capacity is constrained by the road.
The road closure imminent on Crescent Beach. There, you're gonna have to detour out through Mount Baker Road.
It's underwater.
It's
Oh,
no longer,
it's all.
don't be sound to those areas, go big. That one.
Yeah, I'm not the voice of what's imminent, like from a management standpoint, we're just like sharing these maps that we're creating.
It's not currently on the transportation improvement plan, but obviously as this continues to get eroded and damaged, we're gonna need to be thinking longer term about, alternatives to get where people where they need to go.
I think it would cost several $1 million, but you could also sort of elevate the road, then build a bridge, water going underneath. That's a
Yeah.
huge infrastructure project, obviously.
Yeah, that would be a huge infrastructure, and you also have the water that's coming from this watershed on the backside. So you build a dike but you're
Well, I'm thinking of like a bridge.
running both sides, yeah.
It's like Oxford Street down.
Right.
Yeah.
Building a bridge.
What is looking at these maps, like, we're looking at flooding, but also, isn't it's relevant to think about what the underlying soil type is? Right, if this is rock, or if this is, if.
Yeah, that's
If
an,
this is, if this is that sandy, sandy beach or limestone or something sandstone, or if this is, hard granite,
mhm.
that, like, I don't know if that road is built on top of granite, or is it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of scary, right?
This is definitely Sandy Beach, but you do bring up a good point because there's a lot of bedrock. And, some of these maps haven't integrated where that bedrock is. So they can appear more vulnerable even though there may be bedrock outcrops kind of constraining the landward recession of the shoreline. So I think, so here by the Orcas Ferry Landing, you can see really well that, they also match the recession of the bluff here. This green hatching kind of conveys that area that's vulnerable to bluff recession, as well as the areas that are vulnerable to flooding across those different projections. And then, moving on to Eastsound near Deer Harbor Road. There's, an expanded area here, that's vulnerable to both, flooding and, bank recession. Now, there are bedrock outcrops that some of these buildings are kind of rooted on, but, they would still be inundated, even though it's bedrock. The bedrock is really, only helpful in the erosion hazard. So just to mention that, and it is important to be mindful of some of these, some of the local conditions, that you're aware of, like as people who live here and know the shoreline on a day-to-day basis. And, when you're interpreting this mapping effort, because it's still like remotely mapped and people are doing the best that they can with the status of the science. And these are really impressive products, but everything has limitations.
Are these created by Kara, your company, these maps locally?
No, these were created by someone else, another firm. Yeah.
As part of the risk and vulnerability assessment we did previously.
In the county?
It was ESA that was doing that, but we run all Tyler and the South Fork and Public Works were involved.
Public Works.
Yep.
Public.
Yep, they participated.
And the environmental stewardship department.
Yeah, and we're environmental stewardship. So it's us and Public Works working through seeing what we're gonna have to do going forward.
So there's some actions that you can take to kind of help, better understand the extent of the floods during high water events, and that's using the MyCoast app. You can kind of document what a photo looks like during a storm or high water event, as we near king tide season, which really starts kind of later in fall, kind of November, December. And this app is great for both documenting landslides as well as those high water events.
Yes.
And that's more.
Yeah, no, I think we're good for a break now. We've been chatting for an hour, time to get up and stretch. Looks like it's Yeah, the lights on 6:35.
Still your eyes.
So we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes at 6:45. So there's water, there's bathrooms through there, there's apples and pears there. But yeah, and come back and we'll have more of a discussion for the second half.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a large volume of gravel and sand that would be added to the beach to provide kind of more of a buffer against the waves. In the middle graphic, you can kind of see that beach nourishment prism is just focused on the upper beach to kind of bolster the elevation and kind of resilience of the storm berm, which absorbs wave energy and provides some protection from erosion and flooding. And then waterward of armor, it can be used to mitigate for habitat loss, to kind of like build up the beach waterward of the armor. Particularly in that lowermost example, it's unlikely to sustain for a long period of time, particularly as waves can reflect off of like vertical armor structures, and that can lead to, kind of further scouring of the beach so it's really kind of a temporary or short term, as it's noted there, mitigation for habitat loss. But there we go.
Yeah, another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
Also, shoreline armoring is something that can be used, but it does have kind of limitations with that. So it can help slow erosion. Doesn't really do much for flooding, because once water overtops that, then you have water on the other side, and then that creates problems as well. It also can't stop all erosion, and it requires maintenance and re-engineering over time. So it also can result in a loss of habitat, where, as Andrea was sharing, doesn't really have place for that intertidal area. Removing armor and restoring an area is also another tool that we have. So this is on Orcas,
North Beach.
So a storm berm that was restored, where there were large cobbles or large boulders and riprap there. And then beach nourishment was added and the area was restored.
Yeah, across the entire beach profile, like a huge volume of material was brought into that beach around the 1980s, and it has sustained for decades. It's in, good health today.
Is that Lavanino Lane that we're looking at on the west side of the airport?
It is,
Yeah.
it is west of the airport. Yeah, I don't know the street name though, sorry.
Yeah, but that, looking over there, around the time would be North Beach End, right?
Yeah, so yeah.
So that was in the eighties, is that right?
Yeah. And then like an additional property was included that wasn't previously included by CGS. But yeah, I worked for CGS, or Jim Johannesson, who took that picture, is credited in the bottom right. For a long time, we went back and monitored the original Bower Beach and noted how it had sustained. And this whole technique, as well as some of the other techniques, is described in a document called the Marine Shoreline Design Guidelines. You can look that up and read all about it if you like.
Question on this, as we talk about sea level rise.
Yes,
Impending sea level rise.
yes.
What happens when sea level rise 2 feet there? We have to go back in and rebuild that bluff?
So you can't really rebuild the bluff,
Well, I mean,
but
the water level is gonna go up 2 feet.
yes.
So what happens?
Well,
Does the berm build itself?
yeah, the berm will build up, but it may still be inundated depending on the landward elevation. So there's some vulnerabilities there, particularly associated with the surrounding topography and where drainage is going. I mean,
This is on that map that shows
Yeah.
purple and blue.
Yeah.
This is, I think, probably
Over top.
the darkest of the darkest in that whole map.
yeah,
So, I mean, to me, I see this, the shoreline armoring fixed the problem, but ultimately,
It's still gonna get.
it's still gonna get inundated.
Yeah.
there is, I gotta say, some uncertainty in where the theory meets the modeling. The sediment transport has not been modeled in those maps. It's more, they've included a lot of the processes, but it hasn't included sediment transport cross shore or along shore. And maybe that's like a good sidebar discussion. since it's pretty technical and I don't want to like it's a really valuable resource and I don't want to discredit it in any way because I think it's very informative and a good starting point. But there's little realms of uncertainty and where theory meets practice and shortcomings in existing data sets and how you kind of need to apply an informed eye or a certain level of interpretation when looking at areas like this.
And some of it too has to do with like sea level accelerating, right? Like as it's
Yeah.
been slower, the beach has more time to adapt. But if we see a bigger acceleration, then it's going to be harder for the beach to match pace with that,
Yeah,
right?
but none of the models, you
Yeah.
know, really are taking into account sediment transport.
Mhm.
That company's still in business?
Yes, yes.
Yes, they are. Okay, so those are things about homes. Also just want to chat about a couple other vulnerable things. So for septic systems, which is a big concern for many folks, one tool we have in the toolbox is to look at converting them to holding tanks. So having it be above ground or below ground, but in a way that it's not going to allow sewage to seep out. Or also community members banding together and looking for new land that's higher elevation to do community septic. We're kind of looking at redesigning a septic system for many households in a way that it's not going to be impacted.
Do we have any of those on Orcas or anywhere in San Juan County? And are they even allowed?
Community septic systems, well, in fact,
Yeah.
we're like talking about the potential need for several locations are probably gonna need something like that because their whole neighborhoods are gonna be, getting inundated.
There are some community septic systems.
We do have some.
I'm thinking Eagle Lake.
There's one in Deer Harbor, where the Opal neighborhood is,
Lahari.
is Lahari the one, I think that's right, the one above the lagoon,
Yeah,
right
Lahari.
adjacent to the lagoon, yeah.
Yeah, Lahari has a big community grant field. And Camp Four Winds has a massive, I don't know, I call it a community grant field because it's one landowner, but it's multiple structures that are going to a large system.
Their bases, then it's not private housing, but their base has to hold their building back to that in the field by the stage.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, a couple examples. Some of the strategies we talked about for homes also could work for roads and utilities, which is definitely an interest for this discussion, given that the roads are kind of shared resources that impact many people. One is to elevate and armor roads. So the top picture is a picture from the Netherlands where they've got huge waves. So that's kind of an extreme example of a lot of fill, that road really raised up and armored to protect against waves. Another option is to remove roads. So think about removing them and looking for a new location to put them, or maybe a section of the road where it's not going to be impacted or won't be impacted for a long, long time. Or another option is to adjust road use with edge lane or seasonal access. So maybe the road is not usable at some times because it's flooded, but it's usable other times of the year. Or maybe the road goes down to one lane and that one lane is able to accommodate traffic from both directions, but just has a little bit more space there. Or maybe a road becomes a bike path or a walking and pedestrian path. So many kind of different potential solutions for that. Here's a couple examples, maybe familiar to you all. I believe these were also taken by Tina. So Montgomery Lane, Deer Harbor Road, both on Orcas, and then Paddle Point Road on San Juan. These are examples of roads that were removed and or turned into other uses or realigned. Okay. So now I want to move more to us talking less and hearing more from you all. We presented a lot of stuff. I'm curious to hear reactions. Like what about this is interesting? Are there questions that you have? What have you seen work other places that you might want to see here? What ideas do you
I
have?
think that one of the questions.
Yeah.
Is the islands themselves, but obviously the transit by ferry
to Fidelity Island, and there's, the, island that there's been, and we would be impacted by flooding, over there as well. Then I'm kind of curious if you, and I've looked at the maps and see if they have those for that area as well.
Yeah, I believe the mapping was county-wide.
It's just countywide, so if you're talking Fidelity Bay, we wouldn't have that, that's.
But Skagit may have done a similar,
Yeah.
They may have done something. But this was actually county funding.
This is Skagit.
The lady right in front of me. To look at our risk and vulnerability with the idea at the time that the federal government, was looking to fund, help support communities build resiliency. And so, yeah, in order to get in that line, you had to have this sort of work done. So we've done the work and now the line disappeared. We're gonna have to figure out something else, but, yeah.
To the Skagit point, Skagit has done a lot of work similar to this. I know that they, their sea level rise discussion is somewhat different than ours in terms of it's less focused on the coastal erosion's impact on infrastructure, and it's more focused on ultimate inundation because they are so flat and they are so sea level oriented.
And
So they've done some,
the
yeah.
Delta-
well,
Delta.
and,
It's done by the Skagit River System Cooperative, right?
yeah, through their, oh God, what's their jurisdiction? They control all the dikes.
The Dike District.
Yeah, and I think the dike district has been deeply involved in that.
And there was like a consortium or like
Yeah,
a Skagit,
Yeah, it's.
a
whole-
Skagit research
So I
consortium.
expect they have maps that are very similar.
They do, USGS was heavily involved in that process and, yeah.
And I think to the
definitely
point of
see that.
us, the impact on us is, I mean, I think it's a little bit clearer to go. That where Fidalgo Bay comes in there by the refinery was completely, we were completely cut off. Because of,
Oh, yeah,
coastal
right,
invasion
Highway 20 and
Yeah.
that connection between Similk Bay and that Marches
Yeah,
Point, where the golf course is.
Where the,
Yeah.
yeah, the golf course actually flooded.
Yeah, and that has been mapped as vulnerability for quite some time. So,
Yeah.
It's a known entity.
Yeah,
Right?
So maybe the.
more historic wetlands.
Yeah.
too, feeling that.
Second workshop was gonna do a deeper dive into talking about solutions, probably do some roundtable with the maps and talk through like, particularly in the case of access, we'll have a public works director here to kind of talk through, the different options that, we might consider. And we're looking to have your feedback in some of those. So we've shown you 3 locations. Are there others for us to help us like formulate what areas are you most concerned about? And what issues are you most concerned about to help inform kind of the ongoing conversation?
Yeah. So that your harbor slide with the West Town with all the armoring that's already been done and the rings. All of that is like 10,000-year-old landfill. How effective is armoring gonna be in the long run with
Are we that one?
It's one that does West Town. It's
Sorry.
not your harbor.
Yeah, slide down.
So with the 10,000-year-old landfill,
Wait, sorry, which one?
that one.
Yeah, great.
are we talking about the cultural resources there, or is there also a landfill there?
it's just really loose. It's all,
Yes.
Are you
Yeah.
thinking it's like a glacial deposit or something?
it's very loose, but
Yeah, I think that, that is not gonna be a resilient shoreline. It will continue to be very vulnerable to erosion. And so
There's a lot going on.
there's a lot.
Between the wetlands, over to the east side there, and then a really tight vertical wall. And then there's been armor added to the bluff on the west side. So that material is not coming down and contributing, sediment. You do have a little bit coming out of that Crow Valley Creek comes down and discharges in there. But there's a lot of interesting dynamics there, and of course, we have, the road is what I'll call maybe a little soft. It has some cracking and other things, so, yeah, thinking about long-term and how to get through this area, you know, with, particularly with larger, heavier equipment. You know, like dump trucks running on there, if you're standing on the road, like you can feel it shaking. So, really, we need to think about this one.
Is anybody from this community?
Is there anyone in that area?
Yeah.
We're gonna vet this.
Yeah.
Certainly.
So maybe, for the next, workshop, you could invite some of your neighbors and friends to come and have a conversation with us, like, what do you think about it? And, you know, what options might be available to help everyone, you know, still have access to their homes. We're recognizing that this is, really vulnerable. Like, how else can we get through this area? You know, and still preserve some circulation and access and all of that. I don't know what the answer is, but I need to think about it.
What would be helpful was trying to actually figure out a timeline, you know, because I remember from business school, they talked about halftime, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, like, people really start digging in once they get to halftime and
Yeah.
their deadline is, and so I know when you kind of uncomfortable and then things will move and it's dependent on other funding, so it is a moving target, but I think having some sort of,
So if we said like 2030 is halftime,
or something.
Well-
right? So by 2060, this will probably happen.
And I think the other piece to that is, time to failure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how everybody
That's a
has,
shorter time.
but I think
It's hollowed out under there.
Yeah,
as we look at, and I would have a different slide to look at, but time to failure,
Yeah.
with some of these,
That looks like Walmart is place there.
yeah, he's up.
He looks like he's right dead smack in that mass.
And, yeah.
But it's those
Yacht
green,
Club is there, the yacht club's extending into the green, and then the west side community. Well, yeah, sorry, yacht club is not in the green, the yacht club's above, but yeah, that's right.
The community center there, and you know, the foundation of that community center is starting to crack. So
wow.
we can't ignore it. So we probably need to think about it as a community.
What about the areas that we don't see, like, I'm from Deer Harbor, so I'm obviously interested in what's going on there, but I see no map. Do you have the map, from the other company, or is it on now, it's already been done?
Yeah, all of that's available online.
Yeah.
These were identified as kind of the hotspots as they related to road infrastructure. So 13 miles of road that are at risk. And so we were focused primarily on the public infrastructure, but obviously when we mapped these areas, we extended out so people would understand, you know, if their private homes in the area, they would see it. So, yeah, you can take a look at those maps and you can see what's going on, but we picked the kind of the hotspots that we know are already a problem and are only gonna get worse.
well, I think to speak to Deer Harbor Road, if you look to the left there where we see the purple colors. You know, that, I think it was some of this work that spurred the realignment of the road
Yeah,
where the landmark property is.
Yeah.
The road was realigned because it was sloughing noticeably. So they
it's
were,
being held up by an old growth law.
it was being, yeah, and I think the log was placed there when they built the road thinking, oh, this will be great. But that's why the road was realigned there at Deer Harbor, because it was sliding into the water. The nice thing there was we had a cooperative landowner who allowed us to move the road under the property, which was the land. So we made a deal with ourselves. That's a little harder when you start to go along there and look at every property owner there and say, the road is slipping off here. We need to relocate it.
Is this already available digitally, is, at least, been done, old fashioned paper?
Oh, but
In a book form?
we do not have a printed version of this, stuff, but it's in the PDF, and so you can look at it in a PDF.
It's football,
Yeah,
Orcas, there's thousands, there's a few thousand copies, why couldn't we
yeah.
do this and sell that articles? And
Which-
scare the hell out of people.
Yeah.
Come to the next meeting.
Yeah, we certainly could, and,
Okay.
yeah, there's, we could certainly put out the maps, and that probably would, alarm enough people that everyone shows up next time.
Notify us by email or.
Yeah, we can-
You have scheduled for the second session?
If you signed up, when the next one is?
It's gonna be the last week of October, which venue falls on which date for which island is up to, in the air, but it's either 27th or the 29th is what it's looking like, October 27th or 29th.
And this website that I'm showing here, if you search sea level rise San Juan County, this will show up, and this is a lot of resources, including the report and the map. So I had that up earlier, but you can go here to look for more of that.
Oh, I like that overview map.
Yeah, so like there's,
Good
yep,
title page.
yep, so lots of maps here where you, yep,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been in the government for 6 years.
Yeah.
yeah.
So the places, the other places that occurred to me is vulnerable, or that we should know whether they're vulnerable or not, or obstruction paths, or all of our gas gets charged in.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
And trying to think if there's another place that.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah.
I really appreciate Justin's in the beginning here and that leadership in the county and then, but obviously I'm going to suggest hearing it, but is it in a group that it has far more influence on all of us that I wonder if you come across is the insurance industry.
Yeah.
And what is that thinking for us?
It's funny you should mention that. Yeah, we didn't invite them to this meeting, but we certainly could start to have a conversation. It came up on Lopez.
Yeah.
Where, and actually I got an email today from somebody, realtor is trying to sell a particular home, asking me whether or not the house that they're trying to sell is going to be inundated. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I want to. I directed them to the maps. I said, they can make informed decisions themselves, but the point that one of the property owners made is they said that, they are no longer able to get flood insurance. And so what that means, for people who want to buy on the shoreline, you're gonna have to have cash. Or, because you can't get a mortgage without flood insurance if your home is in the floodplain. And we don't know what the future holds with FEMA as far as whether or not they will continue to back that, because there's a lot of pushback across, because we're having natural disasters kind of in every corner. It's no longer just about flooding. FEMA doesn't currently back fire insurance. So there's a mismatch there. It's another natural hazard that happens that is not being supported, but overall, what you really want to keep an eye on is, the secondary insurance market. The insurers who insure the insurers are walking. And so the risk just spikes, and so either you're gonna continue to see those insurance rates keep climbing, or people, or some insurances not, being willing to even, insure. So, yeah, there's a lot here.
I was just gonna add that some of the real estate, like Zillow, are trying to add fire risk layers.
Yeah.
To their maps, so eventually they'll probably have to have this similar maps like you guys.
Well, they do floodplain, they historically have done floodplain, risk. and-
Or even for interior.
Yeah.
Coastal stuff is a whole new science.
Yeah.
So,
Just a question, and I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Does Washington State require realtors to have a flood map when they advertise a property?
No, I don't think so, but it's like classic.
In Arizona, they do.
Yeah.
Of all places, you know, and you think Arizona, okay, but that's because of the heavy rains and.
I think if it's in a 100-year floodplain, that has to be identified in the disclosure.
It is.
So if it's in the 100-year floodplain, it has to be identified in the disclosure, but not in that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a state legislative question really, but
No,
I would think that should be a requirement.
yeah, and you can always, go to the county website and see the 100-year floodplain maps for anyone who's buying a home, like, I got my home. First thing I did, went and looked at the existing, FEMA maps, and make sure. So that is allowed. The thing that it doesn't cover is, the FEMA floodplain maps are one thing, where all the other flooding comes from, particularly in the islands here. The other flooding that we have is likely to come from the streams or groundwater. Those things are not gonna show up on the FEMA map. So that's really kind of localized knowledge, about what's going on with the water.
Yeah, because we have a lot of out-of-state buyers.
Yes, yes.
You know, they don't know what they're doing,
Then they,
you know?
well, if they don't know what they're doing, then they're calling.
They,
They're calling us and calling other people when the second a storm hits, and they didn't expect it.
That's right.
and they often don't know about the dangers of coastal bluffs as well, or what a feeder bluff is, or that they're continually eroding.
I know all that
And-
information is available, but again, I've been looking at real estate in Arizona, and every advertisement has a flood map and a fire map and and that's a requirement, that's a state requirement to post that, and it's not a question for this group, but it could be a question for state legislators, whether that's a wise thing to do.
Yeah, I think there was also a study of shoreline property owners that I read a while ago that was discussing how many shoreline property owners it was like an emotional purchase, like that was really what drove them
Exactly.
to buy, was feeling that dramatic view or the emotions that they felt upon entering the house rather than the practicalities.
Yeah,
And they
I've done
also
that.
turn over
Yeah.
with greater frequency as well. People don't live on the shoreline the majority of people don't live on the shoreline for a long time.
And that, comment about understanding the risk when buying a property or looking to develop somewhere, that's something that communities across Washington are having that conversation too. We've heard that from other communities we've worked with, especially with the new requirements from the state to include climate planning as part of the comprehensive plan. So trying to understand the climate risks when looking at planning growth out for the next 20 years and being really aware of where is their flood risk, where is their fire risk, where are there these other climate related hazards.
And where to focus development in the future, because obviously we don't want any more people in hazard zones than there already are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry, another question, one of the vulnerable infrastructure and the resources is saltwater intrusion.
Yeah.
Did you map, did you come across that or?
Yeah, we didn't, you can kind of assume when those areas flood that you have saltwater intrusion. The county does have, some saltwater intrusion monitoring primarily on Lopez. Because they have really, a lot of glacial till and it seeps right in there. So they have elevating levels of, what is it, fluoride, I think, in the water supply there. So they're particularly vulnerable, and I'm sure there's other pockets. One of the things that, we are hoping to do, we're gonna be working on something called integrated water resources management, which is kind of pulling in all of these kind of older plans and the monitoring data that's been collected over the years and the USGS work that has just recently been completed. And really try to, and work with, the water purveyors, as well, to really try to lay out the roadmap of water management, here in the county. Because people are asking what's going on with water, and are we planning for resilience with climate, with these intense winters, and then we're gonna be dry the rest of the time. How are we holding enough water? Are we managing things appropriately? So we're gonna be taking a harder look at that. It's starting in late, 2026. So watch for that, and we'll do some mapping because I am equally curious.
Yeah, I saw your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just going back to like public transit and addressing like the causes of climate change. Like I developed a legal framework for the schools, the public schools to partner with the county to provide public transit, like for idle resources, like in the summertime when we have a lot of visitors come, the idle school vehicles, essentially, we can utilize those idle resources to provide public transit and reduce our carbon footprint. I think that we should think about trying to create like more sustainable transit options, just make them options that people can utilize. And so, I mean, of course, we have to, we're gonna have to address, climate change. It could be worse, or it could be better, but, if we don't provide a means for people to have an option to do things like easily, to like reduce their footprint, like what are we teaching the next generation, like our children, to address like this problem at its head? So I embrace the county, like I wrote a piece. I'm an engineer, I'm a software engineer, but I wrote an opinion piece that I shared on this event page on Facebook, and I'd like people to read that and maybe comment it, and I'm trying to help come up with a solution. The reason why the partnership between public schools and the county is because there's not a lot of funding right now, right? Because of our political and economic situation. So I had to get to thinking, well, how can we fund this without needing like large capital measures to build new infrastructure and stuff? Well, it's like the school does have a transportation system, right? Like, and it is functioning. And so maybe we can get a lot by spending a little and trying it out during the time that we need. So thanks for letting me just mention that for a minute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Mitigation is important as well as adapting, and we need all the creative solutions that we can get. Yeah. Yeah.
The framing of the next meeting, right?
Yeah, great.
Because it's 2 hours, right?
Yep.
And it'll be hard to, I guess, is it to set the baseline for just what's happening here and set up some scenarios? Because I'm thinking, West Sound, there's like certainly a little community, like mailing list, right? So we can obviously send that out to everybody, but, people are gonna want to talk about that, obviously, if we listen to the time to failure, like that's gonna do that. But, I have no idea how long it takes to build any of this, right? So it's like, okay, you need to divide this time, right? Obviously, it's a series of meetings, and so I'm curious to actually come to any sort of conclusion.
Yeah.
And obviously having, not just here are your options, but here are the pros and cons of each option, right? To help people get it, and obviously there has to be buy-in and trust built with,
Yeah.
the whole process with the data and everything, but I'm just curious about the longer term process and, people in this room smarter than I am about how to drive to that, or how you guys explain it happening. I'm just curious about how you're one way that out.
Yeah, I guess I would say, we have our consultants here just for 2 workshops, this one and the next one. But then the dialogue will need to continue, particularly in the communities that are expressing strong interest in trying to remedy some of these challenges will probably tend to gravitate towards those locations, maybe a little bit more than the others. You know, because there's a bunch of sites, and we want to really probably spend energy in the places where people want to advance an improvement. That's a heck of a lot easier to work with than folks that don't want you to do anything. So we're kind of taking that angle, but you know, the sites that we've got up here, Public Works and Environmental Stewardship have been talking about these locations for years. We're trying to figure out how do we get off the high center with this work. The other thing I would add is that, you know, in terms of trying to like move something forward, try to seek some funding and make some things happen. The other part of what this workshop and this information provides us is for the counselors, as we develop some policy around how we're gonna respond. So hearing from you and coming and doing some workshopping and talking about the things you're concerned about and timing and all of those pieces play into that conversation of what sort of policy should we have in regard to sea level rise and what are all the issues, because people are bringing up stuff, you know, we haven't necessarily thought of. So this is a long haul process. We've got a pretty good runway to, you know, try to remedy it, but it's better to be starting now and not, you know, at the third quarter. So that's kind of, I don't know if that helps or not, but other thoughts.
I'm just curious where, if anywhere, at county level, or discussions taking place about not becoming a net contributor to these problems through record numbers of building permits, record numbers of tourists coming. Like, we're getting short of some roads and builds and stuff, but like we're, you know, the major industry here is tourism. That's with the ferry system burning something like 20 million gallons of diesel fuel every year. That, you know, we can't pretend that we're in this low carbon utopia out here, even though most of our electricity is renewable. The ferries are a huge source of emissions. So other than, you know, like the private ferries, which is an obvious one, it's probably going to take another 10 to 20 years. Is there any discussion at the county level about decarbonizing, you know, in a real meaningful way and not just doing sort of mitigation mandates? I think it's a high level question.
It's a
Like, are there
very-
other groups in workshop time?
Gas inventory. Yes, so we have a greenhouse gas inventory. If you go into environmental stewardship, climate and sustainability, like, we have a greenhouse gas inventory that actually helps inform our conversation around developing the climate element that is now in the comp plan for consideration by council to review. And then once the comp plan is adopted, we're working on building out from that, the climate action plan. And so that will go into some of these various strategies addressing what's in the greenhouse gas inventory and what we've heard from the community with all the numerous meetings that we have had where we've asked people to give us information. So we'll build that out. Now, of course, we started all of this again at a time when we were seeing an interest in climate. Most of the money that was previously available to advance that work is like evaporated. So it's gonna be tricky for us. It won't deny it. Where, you know, we might have to be in a little bit of a lull, do what we can at the local level and wait for our time when things shift, and then be ready. So, you know, these community conversations, thinking about where roads might align or where we might have to continue to harbor or whatever the case may be, that we sort some of that stuff out and we're ready, that as funding becomes available, and then being able to show, hey, we have a shelf-ready project. That is what, you know, when things turn at the federal level, or at the state level, you know, we're ready. We've got our work and we're good to go. So that's kind of how we're approaching this, just recognizing the realities of the times, doing what we can, so.
Yeah, and these projects are, fairly urgent, like Crescent Beach. That is very urgent, but they're also really way downstream of the source of the problem,
Right.
right? And it's hard to address the problem with these. I think that the
Yeah.
species, with 9 billion people, and have 1 or 2 billion of those don't even accept it's actually happening.
Yeah.
I would like to see more from the county like that, then, you have to go upstream as much as possible.
Yeah, sometimes if the county itself can't take action, then you might have to try to take action and advocate and try to come up with a solution and provide it to the county. That's what I'm trying to do with public transit, is like, the county hasn't provided public transit. I reached out to the transportation parties 2 or 3 years ago, but to groups in the community who didn't respond to me, like, when I asked about creating public transit. And so now I'm trying to proactively design a public transit solution because nobody else does. And so if you see a problem and you try to come up with a solution, it might or might not work. They might, people might not embrace it, but at least, the county might not have resources to solve your problem for you.
Well, didn't it turn out the biggest contributor besides the ferry was marine traffic?
Yep.
Yes.
Inward burning.
Yep, and we're burning.
Yeah.
And those 10 no calculus super users.
Yeah.
That remind me Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, I saw your hand up.
I'm gonna say the obvious. This is going to be very, very expensive. I mean, we're talking probably billions of dollars here, just for the roads alone. We don't have a state highway on anywhere in San Juan County, and yet if you look at the RCWs and the WACs, we qualify for state highways because you can do a state highway to ports, you can do state highways to, state parks. There's many miles of county roads that could be state highways. Trying to get the state to do that might be, but it's been done on Marshall Island, I can't even pronounce it. But there are rural counties that have considerable amount of state roads. Let me throw that trial balloon up. Has anyone considered approaching the Department of Transportation and trying to get some of our county roads put into state roads? Now, they wouldn't move their equipment here, but they would pay the county to take care of the roads just like they're doing now. And it could be, I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar project probably, but the RCWs seem to me that would permit state highways in San Juan County.
So I'll speak to that on a very surface level.
Okay.
The funding mechanism that allows us to get money from the state. So if we suddenly had a bunch of state highways, it would change the funding mechanism, which we're getting money to fund a lot of them. So, and Cindy, I may have to have you help me here, but Capron funding,
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
okay, which is,
And I don't know how much that
which
is.
is a special calculation that you get because you're not getting
Yeah, I'm
standard.
totally aware of
And
that.
so I don't know.
I'd like to see that just on a surface level, take a look at that and just see if the cap-on is sufficient or whether we would be money ahead. Because, cap-on didn't consider
No, I think it would,
these big expenses that are coming up.
I think you should talk to Colin about the process of getting the state to convert to a state highway.
Yeah.
Go there.
Yeah.
That he's the public works director.
Yeah, I know.
so I had one comment to Georgette's comment. You still,
Let's just, folks left, and maybe we can continue some of these conversations, because we have time. This is all really,
This is a workshop too.
we're getting primed for workshop too, so, thank you all for your time and sharing your questions and concerns. Please invite